Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics of Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. For those wondering why those games are paired together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so, as the theory goes, if we dive into Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, we can glean insights into what the world is like and then make predictions about Avowed as it undergoes development and have a better, more nuanced understanding of the game's world when Avowed finally releases. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Rekke and Yezuha, which I know for a lot of you out there has been a long time coming. It's been something you've been wanting to talk about. It's lore that you've been wanting to hear. For those not aware, Rekke and Yezuha are some of the more esoteric lore that exists within the world. You don't know about anything about it until you acquire the companion from the second Pillars of Eternity game, and it requires one of the DLCs to even access this information. A lot of it is shrouded in mystery, and some of it has also got spoiler-related content as well. So I'll give you a quick warning so you can know whether or not you want to listen to this. There are some spoilers in today's episode. Not the whole episode. A lot of it's just going to be about Rekke, the companion, as well as a little bit of his homeland and where he's from. And then it will dive in a little bit when I talk about the history of his homeland, or at least the speculated history. There will be a bit of spoilers there as it pertains to some of the hidden mysteries of the world. So if you want to kind of discover those things for yourself in playing Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, then I will give you a warning later in today's episode of when to jump off. However, for any of you who are here and ready to go learn about Rekke and his homeland, let's dive into today's lore.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
Rekke, I guess, is actually how his name is pronounced now that I'm actually reading it on the Pillars of Eternity fandom. He is a recruitable sidekick in Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, so he isn't a full-fledged companion like a lot of the other party members are. In order to become a companion, you also have to have a companion quest. So all the side quests that have to do with party members in Pillars of Eternity 2, those are companions. They're fully voiced. They have full side quests. They have endgame slides that you see when you're done the game. Sidequick can be voiced. They won't be as in-depth, and they don't have a side quest associated with them. They're just interesting people to tag along, and Rekke is one of them. Rekke is a very interesting person in the world because he is very unique in the world of Eora, at least for people that you can interact with in the world. Rekke is what is called a storm folk, and that is a subtype of human. If you've heard me talk about humans before in this world, you'll know they're called folk, and a storm folk is one of the more unique ones that exist because they come from a land that is currently unknown and on the other side of massive storms that exist within the world of Eora. As a quick review on why this matters, there are meadow folk, savanna folk, and ocean folk, and each one of those types of humans hail from different cultures and hail from different countries and backgrounds. And you can largely trace back these ancestries of different types of humans to certain countries. Ocean folk, for example, they come from Old Valia. The meadow folk hail from a deer and that lineage in history. The savanna folk come from the Natlan culture, which is Ishatimil. All of these cultures are already a group of people that exist in the world. They're already a group of people that are known by the rest of the world because a lot of this world of Eora has been dominated by the civilized societies, and they all kind of know each other. They know a little bit about each other's cultures and societies. However, stormfolk, there are no stormfolk cultures running around that everyone is aware of in the common world. This is not a type of human that we're aware of. And so when we meet Rekke, and we learn about the Stormfolk subrace of humans, it introduces this brand new culture, this brand new country that can exist within the world of Eora. And that's an exciting prospect because it means there's more of the world to discover. There's more that's new to it. Stormfolk are very pale with their complexion, and they have bright red hair. They're essentially the gingers of the Pillars of Eternity world. So if you want to roleplay as a redhead, you're probably going to be a Stormfolk. If you actually go to the in-game cyclopedia for the Deadfire game, it has this to say about Stormfolk for official lore. They are so named because they are believed to come from the lands east of Andra's Mortar. Stormfolk are not often encountered in the Deadfire. So few Stormfolk have survived the journey that only a few have ever learned the languages of the Deadfire or the Eastern Reach. The stories that they tell of their homelands diverge so greatly that even a diligent scholar cannot assemble a coherent picture of their cultures. So as we learned from there, Stormfolk are very rare, but they're not exceedingly rare. There are people that have been able to interact with some of them very rarely on occasion. They come from the other side of Andra's Mortar. Andra's Mortar is the name given to this large oceanic storm that essentially bars an entire section of this planet from even being explored. It is considered a death sentence to venture into these storms. But every so often, a person will come out from the other side, and these are the Stormfolk individuals that are named here. Of the Stormfolk that have traveled through, not all of them have learned the local languages of the places that they've ended up in, and those who have learned the languages, apparently they have such different stories of what their homeland is like that there isn't really a coherent set of pictures that people can put together about what their land of Yezuha is like. And I'm not sure why this is. I'm not sure if perhaps these are people who are trying to hide things on purpose. Maybe they're criminals and that's why they're being sent through the storms, and so they don't want to say anything. Perhaps they are spies and they're trying to learn as much about the world they can, so they're not really revealing anything about their homeland so that way they can invade. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, they don't have a coherent idea of what their homeland is like. When you play Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, you find Rekke floating within the water. And so you find this person floating in the water. I think he's just attached to a barrel or something like that. And you can take him up on deck and tend to his wounds and get to nurse him back to health kind of thing. He speaks a completely foreign language, which you learn later is Seki. That's the native language of Rekke and the people from Yezuha. He speaks this Seki language, which you, of course, and nobody on the ship understands at all. But he very quickly learns Adiran, which is kind of like the common language of the world of Eora, at least the common world of Eora, the stuff that everyone else knows. He learns it very quickly, and in talking with him, you learn a lot of interesting things about Rekke himself. One is that he longs to be back home which is Lipisalis over in the nation of Yezuha, which is apparently an entire nation on the other side of Andra's Mortar, as we've already discussed. However, in talking with him, you do learn some things about him. One is that he is basically a missionary, and you can also find this out when you go into his character sheet on the in-game menu. You can see that his background is listed as missionary. When you talk to Rekke about faith or religion, anything like that, he refers to a singular God. He'll often say something like, oh, God said this, or God said that, or have you talked to God? The reason that this is interesting is because in the world of Eora, there is an established, well-known fact that there are gods in this world. Not just one god, but gods. There are a multiplicity of gods. In fact, there's 11 of them that we know of from playing Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. Now, I'm not going to yet get into spoilers of what may be going on here, but suffice it to say that that is something that if you're paying attention to the narrative, you're going to be intrigued by that. You're going to recognize, like, wait a second, he refers to a singular god. What's going on there? So we don't know really at the offset, or really once we get into the spoiler-related lore, we don't actually know why he only refers to his faith with one god. We don't know if he only worships one god, if maybe there's only one god that's active in Yezuha. We don't know if maybe there's another god apart from the 11 that we know about. Like, we don't understand or know what it is that he believes in or why he refers to it that way. But it's a very interesting tidbit of knowledge, and it offers a lot of speculation for people like me. However, as you begin to talk to Rekke more and more, you learn that maybe there is more going on that meets the eye in regards to why he is where he is. You get the idea by talking with him that perhaps he's on this side of the storms as a missionary to bring the word of God to the people on the other side of the Andra's Mortar storms. However, there are times when he is speaking, and there are instances with conversation with him, especially one involving being on a drug trip with a imp known as Drowsy Puke, where it becomes a little more apparent that perhaps he had done something that necessitated him being exiled, and perhaps he took on the role of missionary so not to be just executed entirely. But through conversation, you kind of get this idea that he set a fire, or caused a fire, or there was some sort of a fire that occurred within his backstory, and as a result, it kind of had consequences for him. So in this one instance, when you are in the Forgotten Sanctum, which is a DLC that you can have, there is an imp you can talk to called Drowsy Puke. And at one point, you can sample a set of drugs that exist. And so you can sample these drugs and you can go on a drug trip. When you're on a drug trip, there are these unique dialogue options that come up. There are these unique pieces of narrative that come up. And there are things that different companions will say. And in the case of Rekke, if you have him with you at this point, if Rekke is with you when doing this drug trip, he will say, it was supposed to be a joke, a spark bomb, just to scare him. He shouldn't have caught fire. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, mother, father, don't make me leave. I'll die out there. So it sounds to me like Rekke is holding on to this trauma from this joke that he was playing. He basically put a spark bomb to try to scare someone, but it accidentally caught them on fire and they died. And it seems like his mother and father wanted to make him leave. He says the words, I'll die out there. And my intuition says that the writers at Obsidian are making this as a clear head nod to Andra's Mortars, those dangerous storms that we've been talking about. And so it seems like he was to be exiled into the storms because of what he did. And at some point, though, however, he must have taken on the role as missionary. Perhaps he accepted the title so that way he would have more supplies with him and have a higher chance of survival. Maybe this is something of a penance he's offering to himself. Maybe while he was in the storms, he realized that he wasn't faithful to his childhood faith or something like that, and so he's rededicating himself to it. Perhaps he was out in the storms and he, like many people probably would, just offered a prayer to the sky that said, dear God, if you help me, I will spread the word about you to anyone I see. Some sort of bargaining and something like that. And then, he gets found by you, the player, and survives. And as a result, he maybe is now just fulfilling that. Who knows, right? So we don't actually end up knowing any of that kind of stuff. It's all just speculation at this point. It's at this point, however, that I want to take a divergence from Rekke himself to the place that he comes from. And we're not quite in the spoiler territory yet, but we're getting there. Yezuha is the name of the nation that Rekke comes from, and Lipisalis is the city or home that he comes from within Yezuha. Yezuha is a mysterious region or nation to the east of the Deadfire, beyond the storms of Andra's Mortar. I'm reading this directly from Pillars of Eternity fandom website. It is a vast expanse of hot and dry land bordered by mountains, with dust storms plaguing the heart of the nation, Lipisalis, in dust. The dust storms originate in the vast red desert beyond the mountains, and their language is called Seki. And there are some ancient tomes that we get from one of the Deadfire DLCs that indicate that Yezuha is one of the 3 ancient civilizations that have existed in this world. They were apparently the 3rd major empire, major world superpower in that era of the world, thousands of years ago. And they're still existing today, trapped within the storms of Andra's Mortar. Everything we learn about Yezuha, we learn from Rekke directly. So it being a vast expanse of hot and dry land, bordered by mountains with dust storms, that's all stuff that we learn from him. We do know they have a lot of horses, because at one point, Rekke comments on the fact that you don't have horses aboard your ship with you. And at one point, hilariously enough, you can give Rekke a thing called a strange tablet, which turns out to be in his native language, Seki. And so you, of course, and everyone else around you thinks that there must be some really esoteric, mind-blowing lore written on this strange tablet. But when he reads it out to you, it's actually just a bill of sale for a horse. So of all the tablets that survived the oceanic storms and made its way across Andra's Mortar, one of the things that got across was a bill of sale for a horse. So clearly horses are just part of their culture. I got to read the bill of sale to you because it's actually kind of funny. Prince of the Heavens, this is the name of the horse, I assume, shall be fed only young grasses grown on the hills of Lipisalis. He shall be curried morning and night with a fresh brush made of the bristles of boars fed on golden root. He shall be given to only the handsomest of mares and the most feisty temperament, for he grows bored unless challenged. And when he is sad, he shall have in his ear whispered only the sweetest praise. So it seems to be like a list of demands that one Yezuhan is giving to another in regards to why they're going to sell this horse. And I just love that. It makes me chuckle. I love it so much. Before I dive off into the spoiler-related content, I'm going to read one of the lore books that we find in Pillars of Eternity 2 Forgotten Sanctum DLC. And this is from the History of Eora, Volume 11, The Rediscovery of Yezuha. And the description, this couple few lines here we got is, they don't remember us. They were once us, or we were once them. Before the ascension, before the destruction, before the storm, now we are strangers, our greetings reduced to unintelligible ejaculations of sound. But they will remember, we will remind them, and we will judge the work they've done in our long absence. They should hope we find it sufficient. It's at this point that I'm going to diverge and get into the spoiler-related content. So if you are not listening from here on, thanks for listening to this part of the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find me on Twitter at World of Eora, or you can email me, worldofeora@gmail.com, if you have anything you want to say. But for the rest of us who want to continue on, let's continue jumping into the lore on the city of Lipisalis and the nation of Yezuha.
Lapilikiko? Lakaris? Kezilas tahun? Ke tetahibi? Ke lagahak tetahakus?
All right, so here's the thing about Yezuha. The thing that makes it really interesting in the world of Eora, and this is all going to be spoiler-related stuff, is that, as I've mentioned, it is one of the three major superpowers that existed thousands of years ago alongside the Huana culture with their thriving city of Ukaizo and the Ingwithan society, which is the entire society that made the gods that we know of. So the gods were constructed by the Ingwithan society, and in Ukaizo, the city of the Huana, the Ingwithans set up a machine to control the cycle of reincarnation so that souls will go where they want to go. But there's this one book, another History of Eora book, Volume 7, The Three-Body Agreement, that indicates that Yezuha was actually quite important in ancient societies as well. The representatives of two great empires met in the seat of the third, and Engwith, Yezuha, and Ukaizo agreed upon an exchange. For land and power, Ukaizo would give Engwith a home for their research. For able soldiers, Yezuha would allow Engwith to spread their faith. So it was that Ukaizo conquered the Deadfire, and Yezuhans conquered Yeshe, and Engwith made willing conspirators of them all. So it seems, in some way, shape, or form, that Yezuha provided martial power to the Engwithans so that they were able to complete their apotheosis project and spread their missionary works. Because as we learned in the last episode, the Engwithan society, once they completed the project to create gods, they then went out in the forms of missionaries to tell people who the gods were. And it seems that Engwith had able soldiers and that they actually gave them to Yezuha with the offer that they would allow Engwith to spread their faith. So I guess Yezuha had a different faith than Engwith. And I don't know if they maybe knew something about the nature of the gods or if they were just in denial about it, because the Ingwithans basically discovered that there are either no gods at all, or that if there were, they're not there. Like, they're not here in Eora, they're not here watching over us, they're gone. They either left us or they're hiding or whatever, they're not there. And it seems like they had to almost get permission from Yezuha to spread the faith that they were creating, that you learned about from the previous episode I just did. When you couple things like this with the knowledge that we get from Rekke about Yezuha having one single god, it makes you wonder about the bigger mysteries going on here. Why do they have this idea of one god? Is it one of the gods of Eora, one of the Ingwithan gods of Eora, that basically subsumed Yezuha within Andra's mortar, and they created their own faith? Could Andra herself perhaps have set herself up as the singular only existing god in Yezuha, and so that's the faith that they believe in? Or did there actually exist gods in Eora, but the Ingwithans just couldn't find them? And in their hubris of thinking that they had the power to actually definitively conclude if there were or were not gods in existence, maybe there was one god that existed and finally revealed themselves to the Yezuhans, and so they worship that god. Or perhaps this is all just delusion. Perhaps they all believe this thing that isn't real, or they just continue to have faith in it for thousands of years. Who knows? We don't really understand what's going on. Either way, it's very interesting, especially when you consider that they've been trapped on the other side of the storm for so long. And if they've been surviving for this long, it almost seems to beget that there would be a deity behind helping them survive for this long. One of the other interesting things, which was brought up to me by someone within the community, is the idea of why the Yezuhan nation was even hidden within the storms in the first place. And this is a point of speculation that I have wondered about since they brought it up to me. why would the Engwithans not just destroy Yezuha? Because apparently Engwithans had able-bodied soldiers that they gave to Yezuha as part of this agreement. That's what it says here in this 3-body agreement. It says, for able soldiers, Yezuha would allow Engwith to spread their faith. So they traded able soldiers for this allowance. So why did Engwith, if they had the able soldiers, why did they not fight Yezuha? I don't know. Maybe Yezuha was already a great military and they just wanted more. I don't know. But why did they just sanction them off? Why did they just put a storm around them and leave them alone? But more importantly, why did the gods not just wipe them off the face of Eora if they were a threat in some way, shape, or form? You know, because the gods of Eora, they had this tremendous power. They could pull a moon out of the sky to try to destroy a civilization. Why wouldn't they try to destroy Yezuha? Why were they instead quarantined behind this giant oceanic storm that barely anyone could ever get past? It's an interesting question, and one that I don't know the answer to, because it does imply that there's something going on here. There is an implication that the Yezuhans are necessary to exist, or that they are not able to be defeated. Perhaps there is some force that is keeping them alive. Whether or not it's actually a god or just a very powerful being, we don't know. There's so much going on that we don't know about. And that book that I read before I ended the spoilers section 2 also kind of gives the hint that maybe they don't mean the best towards us. How they talk about how they don't remember us, they once were us, and now they don't understand our language, but we'll make them remember who we are, and they should hope we find their work sufficient. That last line, they should hope we find it, that is the work that they've done in their absence, sufficient, makes me wonder and realize how involved Yezuha was with the Engwithan Apotheosis project. They were clearly involved in some way, shape, or form, just like Ukaizo was. And it seems like Yezuha has been burned by Engwith just like Ukaizo was, because the storms caused Ukaizo to be hidden from the Huana people, and that destroyed their culture. They are no longer the vast, super advanced society that they once were. They are kind of a dim image of what they used to be. And it seems like Yezuha kind of got the same deal, but they managed to survive in those storms. And that's all we really have. The only other piece of lore we have is that the Yezuhans conquered something called Yeshe, which I guess maybe that's where they live, and they wanted to conquer this thing. Maybe Yeshe is a god, and they conquered a god of some sort. I don't know. I'm speculating so hard on this. I don't know what any of this means. But regardless, it's very interesting to think about. Yezuha is one of the most interesting parts of the lore because it's this mysterious area no one knows anything about. It's been blocked off for thousands of years. They have their own culture. They have their own god. And it all flies in the face of everything we know from the World of Eora and Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 before that moment. It makes everything come into question about the nature of the gods, what's really going on, why are these people still here, why were they not destroyed, what's their purpose, what are they going to do? And I imagine if Pillars of Eternity was to enter into a third title, that a lot of these questions would actually be addressed in some way, shape, or form. But as it stands, we're not going to receive answers to those questions unless the people who knew what those answers were decide to put them out for us. But that's assuming that anyone at Obsidian who was working on this had an end game in mind for them. Maybe they just had these ideas of Rekke and a general idea of the culture he comes from, and they were going to figure it out later. We really don't know. For myself, it's a very interesting thing to look at, especially in regards to tabletop role-playing, because it gives me an area of the world that for sure exists in this universe, but we don't know a lot about. And so it's a good place to maybe set a Pillars of Eternity game. It gives a good opportunity to write something into the world yourself if you want to do fan fiction or tabletop role-playing with a group of people. If you have been playing the Pillars of Eternity tabletop game, which you can find an alpha version for on Obsidian's website, or maybe a D&D 5e conversion if you found anything like that, it's all very interesting stuff. And I, for one, I love speculating about it, and I know a lot of you do as well. So it's at this point, actually, that I want to make a request for those of you out there. For those deep Pillars of Eternity nerds who are like, just like me, you're getting into lore, you have questions, you have ideas, you have speculations. What kind of observations did you make when playing Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire in regards to Rekke, Lipisalis, Seki, Yezuha, that whole thing? What kind of things did you observe? What kind of theories and thoughts do you have? Send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter @worldofeora. You can also find me on Reddit. I'm Gingerino on there. I'm always interested in hearing what your guys' theories are on stuff like this. So please just send them my way. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And if anything really great comes out of that discussion, I'll put it on the show for others to hear, possibly even have you on the show if that's something you want to do. But yeah, worldofeora@gmail.com. Send me your theories. But now that we've covered that, let's ask ourselves, what might this have to do with Avowed?
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
So when thinking about it at first, it doesn't seem like there's a lot that Yezuha could have to do with Avowed. And I do want to say before I continue on, if I had to put money on it, my bet would be that there is no Yezuha in Avowed. There's not going to be Stormfolk running around. We're not going to get answers to those big questions. That's my guess. And the only reason I say that is because it seems like Avowed is wanting to go in its own direction. So I don't think that they want to address this massive question from Pillars of Eternity 2. I don't think that's their game. I don't think that's their goal. I don't think that's something that they're wanting to address because it might distract from the Avowed game experience. That's my only guess. I'm not saying that they couldn't take it on. I'm not saying that they won't. I get the sensation that it doesn't align with the experience they want to deliver to address such a huge question mark. But that being said, maybe that's the kind of thing that they're hoping to bring here to entice people back. I mean, Carrie Patel did say in an interview, and she's the lead director for the game, that there were 2 returning characters from the Deadfire game that were appearing in Avowed. Maybe Rekke is one of them. Maybe the Stormfolk is there, because we do know, well, we kind of know from the gameplay trailer that it is occurring around the Deadfire timeline, right? So around the time that the Deadfire game occurs within the history of this fantasy world is when Avowed is taking place. And we know this because of all the different faction flags we see in the gameplay trailer. If all of these factions exist at the same time as these banners indicate, then that would be around the time of Deadfire. And especially that we see 2 recurring characters from that game specifically coming into the Avowed narrative. So there is actually a lot of evidence that supports Avowed takes place around the time of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, which could mean, therefore, A, that Rekke will make an appearance within the Living Lands when we play Avowed, and we'll be able to learn more from him about this kind of stuff. There is also the potential that Avowed will be taking place after the events of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, and if that is the case, then there is a monumental chance that Yezuha actually has a presence in the world of Eora again. Because of the events of the end of Deadfire, if you finish the game, they are now a lot more accessible than they were before. And so there's a decent chance that we could actually see Yezuha or envoys of Yezuha in the Living Lands. Like, perhaps this event that's going on with the Soul Plague has got worldwide attention. And I did point out that there was a flag that we see in the gameplay trailer that I don't recognize the symbology for. I don't know whose flag or whose banner that is. It could, of course, just be a unique faction that was invented for the sake of Avowed, because I'm sure Avowed's going to have their own unique factions. They're not going to have just Pillars of Eternity factions. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just guessing. But the reality is that I don't know what this last banner is. It could be Yezuha. So there's a chance, actually. Again, if I was to bet my money, I would say we're going to see nothing. But there is wiggle room within the lore and within the timeline, depending on when Avowed takes place, that it could happen. And so I do have my fingers crossed. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that Yezuha shows up. I hope that Rekke shows up. And I hope that we get answers to these big questions, or at least get a little bit more so that we can speculate even further. I love this stuff, and I know you guys do too. With that said, that's everything for today. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. Nothing new to talk about. I haven't played Legend of Zelda in a while. I don't think that my thumbs could handle the joystick movement at the time, so I'm doing a lot of mouse and keyboard stuff. I recently actually downloaded The Surge on my Windows PC, because that's something my PC can handle, and it's kind of like a Souls-like game, which for whatever reason is I love right now. So I've been playing that, and it's been a lot of fun. That's me. I don't know what you guys are playing. Let me know when you send me emails about your theories on Yezuha. Let me know what you're playing. I love hearing what people are playing and making recommendations and learning about new games from people. So anyways, that's me. Thanks for everyone for listening to today's episode. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.